Hi, welcome to this presentation developed by me, Mara Briere, a certified family life educator and founder of Grow a Strong Family. A certified family life educator is a professional with expertise in education and prevention on lifespan issues. Our focus is on family systems and the changes they go through when uprooted by chronic illness. When my adult child was diagnosed with a mental illness, I sought information and resources for our family. In spite of being a mental health professional, I was now in need of services for our family. What I discovered was that once our loved ones are adults, there is little to no support or services for families. As is so often the case, the focus of treatment and solutions is on the identified client, our loved ones, with little regard to the supporters and caregivers. So I founded Grow a Strong Family to fill this void. Grow a Strong Family provides customized family life education services to families uprooted by mental illness. We help families replant themselves. Our presentation has how to avoid power struggles. So if you were wondering, am I in the right place? The answer is yes, you are, and welcome. And a little bit about Grow a Strong Family, if you'll bear with me. It is we provide a comprehensive menu of evidence-informed services, which you can learn much more about on our webpage, which is growastrongfamily.org. Our only fee-for-service option is coaching, and we provide the coaching services, which is customized to whatever the needs are for your family. We look at what your strengths are, what it is you hope to accomplish. We tweak it so that it works for you and your loved ones, and we provide ongoing support for the period of time that we are working with your family. So if we say, hey, let's experiment with this strategy, and we get together and discuss it on Tuesday, and you have some questions on Thursday, you simply get in touch with us, and we answer you, and it is all inclusive as part of the service. Everything else we offer is free, and they include skills-based presentations like this one, a support group which currently meets twice a month in Bedford at the Edinburgh Center and once a month at the Gleason Public Library in Carlisle. The name of the group is called Replanting Lives, and it is only for the supporters and other family members whose loved ones have mental illnesses. We offer a pet therapy option with a certified pet therapy pair, which frankly is me and my dog. And Max and I have been providing voluntary pet therapy services for 6 of Max's 7 years. Max is a 65-pound Springer Spaniel Pyrenees mix, very gentle, very kind. He does very well with people of all ages. He loves young children, but he does really well with the elderly and with veterans. We have a social media presence on Facebook. We have a public page, which I try to update on a regular basis with current information, strategies, resources, and events, and a private page for family members only. And in that page is an opportunity for family members to connect with each other, to talk, to vent, to look for services, whatever their needs might be. We update our web pages regularly, so visit us often at growastrongfamily.org. And of course, we collaborate with community-based agencies. And thanks to those collaborations, we have been generously funded by 2 agencies. One is the Shana 15, and the other is the Concord Carlisle Community Chest. The material contained in today's presentation were developed by using materials from the Becoming a Love and Logic Parent program developed by Jim Fay and Dr. Foster W. Klein, and of which the presenter, who is me, is certified in. And I love these strategies and skills because they are useful in all areas of life, but especially with individuals who are having a hard time dealing with the real world in real world ways. And you'll see what I mean as we go on. So in this webinar, we are going to talk about what power struggles are, the what, the how, and the why. And we're going to talk about control and what that looks like and feels like, when is it appropriate, when it is not appropriate. We're going to be offering you several strategies that you can experiment with, and as always, take what you like and leave the rest. we are going to offer you the opportunity to examine what your behaviors are. If they're enabling, then how you can disable the enabling. And, of course, the Serenity Prayer. So here, what we're interested in looking at is, what is the purpose of the power struggle? What is it that you do have control over? What do you wish you had control over? Where do you spend your energy? And I ask these questions because this is typically what we don't ask ourselves, because we're usually in the middle of it. We kind of realize that we're going round and around and around and around, and then we kind of get off of it because we're in the middle of it. It's like the old expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. And sometimes I think to myself, okay, I'll take out a blank piece of paper, and on one side I'm going to write, what is it that I do have control over? And on the other side I'm going to write, what do I wish I had control over? Needless to say, my wish side is way bigger than what I actually have control over. And as you know, what we actually have control over is really ourselves. And that's what we have control over. And sometimes we don't even have good control over that. So again, you want to be thinking about, when you're in the middle of a control battle with your loved ones, what am I doing here? What am I trying to control that's really not mine to control? What do I wish I had some control over? And one of the things that is so startling about this is that when you realize that you don't have control over whether or not your loved one is well, whether they choose to be well, whether they go to their doctor's appointments, take medication, respond to calls when you call them, respond appropriately to text. What else do we have? Medications, whether they're compliant or not, whether they accept tweaking, what kind of services are they willing or not willing to accept, what kind of therapy are they willing to go to or not go to, how are they managing their mental illness or not, and how are they treating you. And what we find when we do this exercise is that, in fact, what we do have control over really is what we're going to do based on what's going to work best for us and for them. A very interesting quote that I use as a guide, and I encourage families to consider, is that if any solution that comes up only takes care of the needs of one member of the family, it is not a viable solution. So sometimes we have to look at that. We might pour a whole lot of energy into what the needs are of our loved one when they're having an episode or a crisis. How long does that last? What does that look like? How long are we going to engage in that? What kind of other solutions is it possible for us to come up with that will more even out or balance the family in a healthier and more effective way? Some strategies to consider, and my first one is always this one, and it's to neutralize the arguing. And it's really a very simple strategy, and it's elegant in its simplicity. I love you too much to argue about this. So every time you're hooked into a potential fight with your loved one, you can simply look at them, and if you can muster the feeling that goes into the saying of the words so you don't say it sarcastically, you just say, I love you too much to argue about this. That's all you say, and you can repeat it over and over and over again. I love this because it gets you out of the fight, and it puts them on notice that you are not going to step into this particular fight. And you're saying it with kindness. I love you too much to argue about this. I'm not going to argue with them over whether or not they take their medication. I'm not going to do that because I've already figured out I don't have control over that. So it's not an argument that I can possibly win. Why go there? I love you too much to argue about this. And then if they want to up the ante, which is not uncommon when their first attempt at drawing you into a fight comes, they might say something like, you're incredibly mean or selfish or thoughtless or inconsiderate or rude. And then you might go into your litany of all the ways that you're not. Don't even try it. Don't even go there. Waste of time. They're just trying to hook you in. So all you have to do is say, I love you too much to argue about this. So that one is what we call neutralizing the arguing, because you're not going to that fight. And it's if you're at work, let's say, and you have an unreasonable demand made on you, you wouldn't say I love you too much to argue about this, but you might say I respect you too much to argue about this. And the intent is the same. Step out of the fight and put the other person on notice that you are not going to engage in what you're seeing as unreasonable behavior. Another thing we do is we can use one-liners, but you want to use these one-liners basically to shut down any further conversation and to not use them with sarcasm. So you can say things like, that's one way to look at it. That's an option. Interesting. Tell me more. You only use tell me more if you want to hear more. When they tell you you're not fair, you're unreasonable, that you don't see things the right way, that if you were in their shoes, you'd see it differently, any of those things. Or you think I'm sick, but I don't, so why should I take medication? I'm going to continue going on without taking any medication. And then you would say, that's an option. At one point, I had one of my loved ones who said to me, I want to get out of the hospital, so I'm just going to go to a shelter and live on the streets. And I just listened, and then I said, that's an option, because, in fact, it is an option. She's an adult, and the hospitals don't require my permission to keep her or not keep her. So I said that's an option. Of course, I followed it up with, how do you think that's going to work out for you? And they hate that because it puts it all right back on them. And what she said to me was, well, I don't really want to stay in a hospital setting. I'm done. And I said, I get that. I understand that. It's an interesting way to look at it. And eventually she backed off. But the purpose of the one-liners, again, is to get you out of the fight. As you recall, when we neutralize the arguing by saying, I love you too much to argue about this, that's also a one-liner. Other one-liners can be simply, you don't even have to say that's an option. Another one-liner that some people use is, let me think. Well, that's good enough. That's one way to look at it. That's an option. Interesting. Another one that you might be wanting to say is, you might say, tell me more. You might say, that's an interesting point of view. That's it. You're stepping right out of it. Don't go to the fight. Another strategy that we like is make your statements into questions. You know how we always want to say, remember the last time you did X, Y, and Z, this happened and that happened? Instead of saying it that way, you can say, I wonder what would happen when you do X, Y, and Z. What you want to do when you make your statements into questions is you're actually putting them from the emotional state into the thinking state. You're basically putting them in the place where they have to start processing their own thinking in a more effective way. It doesn't mean that you're going to find a cure here, because you won't. But what you are doing is you're not taking responsibility for what goes on between their ears. You're not lecturing at them, you're not ranting, you're not raving, and more importantly, you're not rescuing. You're giving them the right to consider for themselves what is going to work for them. So we want to make our statements into questions. We want to use enforceable statements. This is when we tell other people what I do or what I'm not going to do and how I'm going to handle something. So, for example, when I was told by my loved one, I'm going to go live in a shelter, I said to her, that's an interesting option. Well, I don't want to stay here at the hospital, so I'm getting more conversation from her. And I said, I know. That's another one-liner you could use. You can just say, I know. End of comment. And then she said, well, I won't have any money, so you're going to have to make sure I have money because I'm her pay rep. So I said to her, oh, I don't give money to people that aren't safe. That's all I said. And that's an enforceable statement. I'm in charge of the money. I don't give it to people that aren't safe. It doesn't matter that it's her or anybody else on the planet. That's an enforceable statement because I can make it happen. If you wanted to make a statement into a question out of that, I could have said to her, and what do you think I think about that? But where she was in the hospital and very confused, I thought that even framing it that way would be way more confusing for her. Since this is about what I can make happen, it's enforceable. Another thing that I liked, and I used this with my family when my daughter was little, and I said to her, "Oh, honey, I'll listen to what you have to say as soon as your voice is as quiet as mine," because sometimes you would get so excited about something and your voice would get really loud, and I would say, just, let's take it down a tone or two. And boy, let me tell you, she picked right up on that one and used it against me. And that was in parenting, but it doesn't really matter whether it's parenting a small child or an adult or your loved one with a mental illness. This is about how you take good, loving care of yourself and how you make things happen. For another example I could give you is I'm happy to take you to your doctor's appointment when you schedule it between 3 to 5, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. That's basically communicating when I'm available. And I said I'm happy to do it, and during that period of time. I can make that happen. If they come back and say, well, I made an appointment for Tuesday at 1, I would come back with, that's interesting. What's your plan for getting there? See how this works? I'm not saying, no, you can't go. I'm just saying you can't go on my time because that's not when I'm available. Other strategies are to say no by saying yes to something else. So instead of saying, for example, you can't drive the car, you can say, feel free to drive when you've taken your meds regularly. That's fair. I don't want to be feeling that they and the car are unsafe and other people because they're not clear in their thinking and able to pay attention. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is, since I'm not available for that ride to take you to the doctor 1 o'clock on Tuesday, what are your other options? And let's say they say, oh, I can Uber it. And they say, okay. Do you have enough money to Uber it? No, I do not. All right. How do you plan on getting the money? See what I'm doing? I'm putting them in the thinking state. I might be willing to pay for it, but I want to see what their solutions are before I jump in and rescue them from doing something to test my limits and my boundaries. And so that's the strategy, is to say no by saying yes to something else. And then you're not even getting into that fight. Another thing that we offer is delayed consequences. And when we say that, we say, don't worry about it now. I'll get back to you about this later. Let's say you have said to them, when you're over at my house, I do not want dishes left all over the place. Disruptive to me, which is fair, reasonable thing to say. And you come home, and this is the 100th time that they've been in your house, and they've left everything all over the place, and it's a mess, and it's stinky, and you're angry. Well, when you're in the emotional state, that's not the time to try to resolve any issues either. You need to be in the thinking state. So that's when we would say, oh, don't worry about it now. And you might take care of it, but you are also, you wait until you calm down. And then you can come up with what kind of consequences make the most sense. It might be you can't be home when I'm not there. That's one consequence. Makes perfect sense because when you're there, you're able to enforce what's being used, where it's being placed, and how it's being cleaned up. Another thing you might say is, this doesn't really work for me having you here. So I think we're going to have to look for alternative living arrangements. Let's see what that's going to look like and what the need is going to be. And it's reasonable to say that, because if you're living with a roommate that doesn't listen to you and doesn't share the apartment and the cleaning and whatever, you have every right to say, this isn't working for me. Let's do something different. You're the one paying the bills. You get to make that decision. That's what I mean. You don't have to do it right now. All you have to do right now is say, oh, this is not good. So that way, just by saying it like that, you're putting them on notice that this is not good and that you're going to need to come up with another solution. Something else is going to have to happen. And don't worry about it now. I will get back to you about this later. And it could be something as simple as, well, let's see, it took me 2 hours to clean up the dishes, put everything away. So that's 2 hours, essentially, that I'm not available to take you to your appointment this week. I'm sure you can find another way to get there. And that's it. That's how you leave it. And that way you're getting your time back. That's another way to deliver a consequence. I like the good neighbor policy. This is another strategy. And it basically is a good one for us as says the one setting the limit, trying to stay out of the control battle. And it's really very simple. How would you talk to a neighbor that you liked and respected? If their bushes were overgrown and going into your yard and creating a mess, how would you say it to them? You would probably be polite, caring, concerned, no nonsense. You would probably say something along the lines of, it's not like you to leave the bushes for this long. Is everything all right? I hadn't noticed until it was way too bad. What's going on? How can I be helpful? That's how we would deal with a neighbor. Probably a good way to consider dealing with our loved ones, especially when they are symptomatic, because that is not the time to get into a control battle for sure, but it also helps us create a ambiance of concern without a lot of investment on our part emotionally into the outcome. With adult children, we need to step out of the outcome. It's our job to still guide our children. I think this happens with parents and children throughout the lifespan, but it is not our job to be invested in the outcome. And while this is certainly true earlier in life, it is especially true with our adult loved ones who have mental illnesses. They have to learn how to manage and live with their illness, just like we have to learn how to manage and live with them when they're not well. And also when they are well. We want to learn what their strengths are. We want to capitalize on their strengths. We want to remind them of their resilience. We want to work with them on stability and recovery. We want to help them choose to get well when they are not well. So in order for us to do that, we might have to consciously consider, what does this mean to be a good neighbor? And that will help us a lot in taking a step back and remembering, oh, that's right, they're now adults. And they have just as much right to choose to not be well as they have to choose to be well. And you have just as much right to choose not to live in the home with someone that is not well, or to not receive abusive or destructive treatment from someone who is not well, just like you would if it was anybody else on the planet. So you're not doing anything that's special or different than you would be doing otherwise. And that's healthy for you, and believe it or not, it is also healthy for the rest of the family. One of the things we need to be asking ourselves throughout these control battles that we might have with our loved ones is, whose problem is it? And what we need to do is we have to identify if this problem is mine or this problem belongs to our loved one. And these are some simple questions that we can ask ourselves to consider whose problem it is. The first one is, what's going to happen to me personally if that problem doesn't get solved? If they don't take their medication, what's going to happen to me personally? I might have to bring out their crisis plan. I might have to have them hospitalized. I might have to have an assessment done on them. I might have to kick them out. Those are the things, but those are all things that I may have to deal with, but that nothing will happen to me if that problem doesn't get solved, because right there I had a whole bunch of solutions. Am I upset because he's upset? Sometimes we over-empathize with our loved ones, and that's a wonderful quality because, oh my God, I would feel the same way, but that's also a way to stay stuck, and that's unproductive. What happens to me personally? If nothing happens to you personally, your life doesn't get shattered, because remember when we first went through this, we were looking at possible solutions. Look, none of us want to do those solutions. None of us do. But if we have solutions and we understand that this is the healthiest thing to do for ourselves and our loved ones, and the rest of the family who are also our loved ones, then that's what we do. Because one of the things we usually learn is that when we employ these strategies, when we look at these solutions, the reason that they're on the table is because in some manner, shape, or form they have worked. And if they have not been used, we're willing to experiment to see how it works. How might I twist this problem to make it mine? Well, they're going to blame me. I hear this a lot from parents when they institutionalize their children, send them to an acute care facility because they're not safe at home anymore or on their own. And their loved ones will typically say, you stuck me there, it was awful, it was traumatic. And we're meanwhile thinking, yeah, but it would have been way more traumatic if you injured yourself or hurt me, if you were in jail. There's a lot of other ways it would be a lot worse. And so that's a way to not twist it. What you do as a loving parent, as a loving family member, as a loving individual who loves someone with a mental illness, is take on the obligation to make sure they're safe and to make sure they live to tell it another day. And they don't have to like it at the moment. At some point, they do appreciate it because you're doing it from a place of love. What you want to do is disable the enabling. And we do this by saying every time we solve their problems, we're not meeting their needs except to escape from their problems. We're meeting our needs because we need solutions. Every time we allow them to solve their own problems, they do meet their own needs. They will come up with better strategies. If we allow, for example, I'll go back to, I'm going to go live in a shelter and go live on the streets. At some point, this family member did do that. So she knows what that is like. And that was ultimately not preferable to being hospitalized a little bit longer and in a different setting. In the event that the solution is not effective, you can offer to assist with problem solving. And there's a whole set of strategies for doing that, which I have included on our website, growastrongfamily.org, but which I am not going to be discussing here and now, since it's really not our focus for today's discussion on avoiding power struggles. Whatever you do, you want to keep it simple. And the reason you want to keep it simple is that when our loved ones are out of control, are trying to hook us into a control battle, are trying to engage us in ways that are destructive and ineffective for the family. When that happens, the simpler you keep your solutions, I love you too much to argue. What do you think I think about that? You're so unfair, you're so unreasonable. I know, it can look that way. Every time you come back like that, you're keeping it very simple without engaging, and you're putting it back on them where it belongs. They need to be feeling their own level of discomfort so that they can choose to be making a whole different set of decisions. The Serenity Prayer, always a big one whenever dealing with control battles and whenever dealing with individuals who are unwell and whose thinking is not particularly effective. And it very simply is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Remember what we did at the very beginning? What is it I have control over? What is it I don't have control over? The courage to change the things I can, which are the things I have control over. And the wisdom to know the difference. That's why it helps sometimes to write it down so we can kind of look at it up close and personal. Grant me the patience with the changes that take time. Appreciation of all that I have, tolerance of those with different struggles, and the strength to get up and try again, one day at a time. This is the full verse of the Serenity Prayer. I took it from clip art online from an employee assistance program, but I like it because I like the fact that it reminds us we have to be patient with ourselves, we have to be patient with others. We have to be able to appreciate what we do have, including the fact that we can process with fewer distortions, with being well when our loved ones are not well, that we can appreciate that they have a different set of struggles, and who are we to take away their right to resolve those struggles and to engage in a more successful way to manage them. And we can only live and do this one day at a time. So sometimes when we're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can put up with this for another day, you don't have to. You just have to get through today. And that's also something to remember. The resources that were used come from the Klein Fay Becoming a Love and Logic Parent program and the book by Klein and Fay, Parenting with Love and Logic. And you can also visit them online at loveandlogic.com. One of the things that I often do when I work with parents, especially parents of teenagers and transition age youth, and occasionally parents of elementary kids, tweens, the 10 to 12-year-olds, Love and Logic offers an online parenting program called the Love and Logic Way. It's really becoming a Love and Logic parent, but modernized and upgraded. And it's a wonderful online program. And what's nice about it is that it's a reasonable price and it's very accessible. And once once the parents have taken this program and has started experimenting with the strategies, that is also something that lends itself very nicely to our coaching program to tweak it specifically for your family and your situation. So if you have any questions, feel free to visit our website at growastrongfamily.org. In this webinar, we have discussed power struggles, the what, the how, and the why. We have discussed control, what the control battles are, why they're doing their control battles. Typically because they're feeling so out of control that they need to hang on to whatever they can. We talked about a whole lot of strategies. We talked about disabling the enabling, and we ended on the Serenity Prayer. When best laid plans fail, stick to your normal routines as much as you can. Eat and drink in moderation, exercise, green time, look at a tree. Make sure you have your backup plans and that you are prepared to use them. Keep music on hand that you love. Prioritize your time and activities. Be aware that you can say no. And take good, loving care of yourself. It's a process. It's progress, not perfection. If you want more information, again, you can visit us at growastrongfamily.org.